Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Olivia Valentine. I'm a visual artist, associate professor of art and visual culture at Iowa State University, and a member of the Surface Design Association, a membership nonprofit focused on contemporary fiber and textile art. I'm delighted to welcome you to this week's Textiles talk, Sound Made Tactile at the Intersection of Textiles and Science, with Judit Eszter Kárpáti and Esteban de Torre of EJTECH and Lindsay Olson. Textiles Talk webinars are brought to you by the International Quilt Museum, Quilt Alliance, Studio Art Quilt Associates, and Surface Design Association. Before we get started today, a few housekeeping announcements. This is a webinar. Your screens and mics are not active or showing. We welcome questions, which we will answer at the end of all of the artist presentations. Please submit them in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. We are honored to bring you free and inspiring Textile Talk programming. We respectfully ask that you be courteous as you engage with speakers, moderators, and other participants. Your chat comments can be seen by everyone. Please use the Q&A for questions, chat box for greeting others, and survey for commentary or other ways that we can improve these events. If you prefer not to see notifications from the chat, you can click on the chat button to toggle them on or off. Today we will be exploring the cross-disciplinary possibilities of acoustics and textiles with Judit Eszter Kárpáti, PhD, and Esteban de Torre of EJTECH, and Lindsay Olson. EJTECH is an artist duo working with sound, space, light, and time as material building blocks to draw connections between technology and the human body. Lindsay Olson creates artworks inspired by science and technology and was the resident artist aboard the marine research vessel Endeavour. All three artists create innovative work that push the boundaries of textiles and offer new ways of understanding the connections between art and science. Our first presenters today are Judit Eszter Kárpáti and Esteban de Torre of EJTECH. Formed by Judit, a textile artist, and Esteban, a new media and sound artist, EJTECH is a polydisciplinary artist duo working with hyperphysical interfaces, programmable matter, and augmented textiles. Sound, space, light, and time as material building blocks are paramount elements in their shared practice. Their work has been presented in galleries, festivals, and exhibitions such as Japan Media Arts Festival, the Smithsonian's Hirshhorn Museum, Design Museum Holland, Ludwig Museum, and among others. They are currently researchers at the Material Research Hub of Moholy-Nagy University of Art and Design in Budapest, Hungary. Welcome to Judith and Esteban.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for having us.
Hello, welcome everyone. Greetings from the other side of the world, from Budapest, Hungary. It's a pleasure to be here as part of the Textile Talks. And today we would like to show you some of our recent works, which we exhibited at different places in the world, at galleries and also in museums. And the first one that we would like to show to you, it's called the Dung Dakar Cloak. In which we are exploring soft interfaces for different sonic interactions. This is an interactive installation that combines digital jacquard weaving, sound synthesis, fractal geometry, mathematics, and also algorithmic thinking in order to unfold matter into the visual and also into the sonic domain. And those are augmented textiles that are hybrid in a way, and which can provide a rich multisensory experience. And it means that you can create haptic interactions with the jacquard woven interface with the fractal patterns that are sonified in real time via different soundscapes. And it was exhibited last year at the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C. during the Sound Scene Festival. And this is part of our research program at the Moholy-Nagy University of Art and Design, the Innovation Center of it. And you can also see it behind us. And also it was a great pleasure that it was included in the Surface Design Journal, Lasting Impression, last year, exhibition in print. And also it was a great pleasure that it landed on the cover. So it's really nice that now we can show it to you from Budapest.
We have a short video around it. What interests us the most about creating soft interfaces is the interaction, or this alternative interaction that happens between the physical world and the digital world. This one is focused on sound synthesis. So. It's actually a series. At the moment, we have 8 different interfaces.
The textile reacts to different gestures and different haptic interactions, and we integrated special silver spun threads into the weaving, and that's how we augmented the structure of the textile itself.
It is gesture sensitive, meaning that it matters how you interact with it. It is also proximity sensitive. So it's very intuitive to play with it to create sound. The next work we would like to show, it's called Feeler. This was also presented last year in Düsseldorf, Germany. The idea of this work is to sense the space. You can see these are like soft, large-scale antennas. They are sensing the electromagnetic fields happening in the space. These are ever-changing. While they're invisible, right now they are around us, around each and every one of us, because we're all using electronics. And the intent of this work was to make tangible or make audible this invisible landscape around us.
The patterns that you can see in this color red and blue, it was generated by measuring the different qualities of this space, which was very interesting in terms that it's not a usual white cube type of gallery. And we translated the activity that happened in the space and translated into this kind of pattern. So we somehow visualized those happenings in the space and also made audible. That's what we are calling the tone of the space, and translated those invisible structures that happened in this very tall space between these two buildings and into this audible domain.
And you can see on the white textile, those traces are actually the antennas. And it was a soundscape that was not pre-recorded. It was actually being generated during the months that this exhibition was open. We call this sort of sound drone or a hyperspectral drone, meaning that the drone itself was created from this electromagnetic elements happening in the space, in a landscape.
It was a constantly changing and evolving soundscape because the exhibition lasted quite a long time, and all the happenings that, for example, how many people were in the space, or for example, when the lights were turned on or off, or also there was an elevator which has also an invisible electromagnetic field. Those all shaped and changed the soundscape as well.
You can see it's a large scale antenna. So we were hanging this textile from pretty high up, over 10 meters. And yeah.
We also brought to you some of our early experiments because we are, usually for us, it takes quite a long time and we are doing a lot of experiments through this trial and error process. It's kind of an iterative way of thinking. So sometimes an error, it's not really an error, but it can create new ways of solutions or possibilities that implement art installation. This one is in the topic of dynamic surfaces. So what you are seeing right now is a textile screen printed with heat reactive vents. So under the textile, there's a stainless steel thread, and the two motors are thread back and forth and throwing ephemeral traces surface of the textile. This was a really early experiment. Try to also not just visualize, but also make the patterns audible and sonify them.
Yeah, sorry, because while the video was playing, they can't really hear your voice. So it's so we were. She was saying that this was an iteration. We're trial and error. Maybe you want to like sum it up really before I.
And so those two are early experiments connected to dynamic surfaces, and those dynamic surfaces are created by screen printing or hand painting with thermoreactive inks, which reacts to heat. And under the textile structure, there was a moving stainless steel thread moved by two motors back and forth, and we basically created drawings and visualized the sound on the surface of the textile. And this the next one is showing how you can create more gesture-based kind of paint like traces or patterns onto the surface.
Yes, we were very interested in how image creation happens. And this way of creating a painting rather than having a fixed grid on what to work with, but rather this is more like of a painting or of a brush. So I'm going to play the video now. So with this sort of work, with this sort of iterations, we started to add electronics and sound into it. In this case, what we can see is the X and Y axis are connected to a modular synthesizer, and while this painting is being created, it's actually generating sound as well. We found this very tight connection between this painting of the painting of a painting. It's very much time-based, as well as sound. They usually say that sound is like painting on time, or music is painting on time. So we connected both of them and created a composition that is painting on the canvas as well as painting on time. This is also an iteration. This is something that inspired us. It's a picture made in a single moment. No, it is built up piece by piece like a house, and the spectator is looking done in a single moment. And this is something that very much interested us, this way of approaching and looking at art, whether you can go back to it and see it again and again, this sort of slow way of looking at art. Yeah, this is.
in this previous video, we used two different kinds of thermochromic ink, which reacts to heat. The blue one reacted on 50 degrees and the black one reacted on 30. That's why we drew the same image, but it looked totally different because of the temperature. And from those experiments, we created our next art installation called Xenoptics, enactment of neo-analog agencies. And this was a performance installation drawing around the topics of language. For example, we created by those special inks, we created the language around this, and you can see a triptych, an altar piece. That's what how we are calling this piece. And behind the textile panels, there are three robots drawing different patterns onto the canvases, which were treated by those kind of heat reactive pigments. And also we used the same ink that we are using in LCD screens. It's called liquid crystal.
You can see the different inks. The white one, that's one sort of reaction, and the vertical shape, the right hand of the screen is not too white. There's a gray vert. I don't know why that shape is there, actually. I'm sorry if somebody sees a shape. I don't know where it's from. I don't know. Okay. Oops. I hope it's better now. So these are the two types of inks that we were using, and you can also see it here in working. This is in real time. As the heat dissipates, you can see how the trace also changes and it disappears. During this time where we had this exhibition happening, we had like different performance sessions, anywhere between 20 minutes and 30 minutes, 45 minutes, where the triptych itself, the motion and the language that it would print, it would also be sonified. We call this sort of prints thermoglyphs. This is a time lapse from one of these performances. What? These are the thermoglyphs. These are, all of them have an intended symbolism that each person can figure out by themselves. This is called
apophenia.
Mm-hmm.
It's a phenomenon, for example, how you can connect meaning to a certain pattern that emerges. And in this case, it's a constantly emerging pattern series that are very ephemeral and always changing, and it's like a system, a dynamic system that is constantly alive, or a living system based on different principles, mathematical principles as well. Can go to the next.
Yeah, I'm trying to get rid of the gray thing, but I just like somehow I can't. Sorry, I don't know what they are. Yeah. This is the behind the installation, the synthesizer and like this robot arms that Judith was talking about.
Mm-hmm. And our next topic after the dynamic surfaces is the textiles as outputs. We work a lot with textile speakers, interim made of textiles, and this was my PhD topic as well. And just to show some of our 2 early experiments before we are showing the finished large-scale installation. Then the next one is a high-fidelity textile speaker.
All the sound is actually coming from the vibrating textile. So everything you could hear in the previous slide was the textile vibrating in order to create music. We experimented a lot around this. As Judit mentioned, it's part of her doctoral degree. And this is an example of how we could control this different electromagnetic coils. So with this sort of gained knowledge, with this long process of iteration, we started to work on creating large-scale installations. This is one of the first ones. It's face in, face out. The black textile on the table or laying down, it has 48 independent channels, while the white textile in the back has 5 independent channels. They can all vibrate in any frequency from 0.01 hertz to 20,000 hertz, meaning that when they vibrate, they're audible.
The textiles were created by using a laser cut from a conductive textile, which is a galvanized textile, using silver, copper, and nickel. And the size of the shape, the spiral, and also the thickness of the lines does matter. And it was applied on a windproof fabric, in this case a white one, and in this case a black one. And under the textile, there are neodymium magnets, and those elements together create a soft textile speaker as an output. So it's based on the same principles as how a table or a normal speaker works.
Here's a we're gonna kind of like go through. This is the software that was written in order to control this interface that you just saw, this textile, the 48 channel one. We were also in the Japan Media Arts Festival with this work. We wanted to show some of the final installations with this train of thought or with this framework. I'm just gonna go quickly through them. This is one of them. this is the draping sound. You have the conch shell synthesizer in the center of the space, which allows you to control the soundscape happening. The white textiles are for sound creation, while the colored textiles are for motion. We would like to show you a motion video in a moment about it. So then you can kind of see how the higher frequencies, they manifest into sound, but the lower frequencies, they remain on the textile and allow it to dance or to come into motion. I'm just going to push through because I think we're like a little bit over our time. This is one of the LFO textiles, we call them. This textile is pushing a low frequency. It has 2 channels on each side. I mean, one channel on each side, meaning that it's a stereo textile. This space was filled with the other textiles creating sound. The centerpiece was specifically for motion, and we would like to show you how that looks like. Okay, super. So this was us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this was it. If you would like to know more, just write us in the chat or please visit our website and our Instagram account. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing. We're back. Yes. I hope you could hear everything that we were saying. And afterwards we realized that when the video is up, then you can't hear what we're saying. But all right. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to EJTECH for that amazing presentation. So much good sound and visuals. I really appreciated that. So our next presenter is Lindsay Olson. Lindsay's artistic practice grows out of an intense curiosity about the ways our society is supported by science and technology. She has worked as Fermi National Accelerator's first artist in residence, with the CMS experiment at CERN in Switzerland, with the MWRD, and with the Field Museum. Her work has been shown at the Shingote Museum, the Zhao Brothers Art Gallery, and the Field Museum, as well as the University of New Hampshire. She's a graduate of Columbia College, where she has also taught for 20 years. She uses her skills to create innovative textile art to connect viewers to scientific research and pushes the edge of expression with textile processes.
Thank you very much, Olivia. I appreciate being with you here today for Textile Talk. For the last decade, I have been partnering with scientists and conservation groups to create art that tells the story about how scientific research supports our society. I use the artwork to communicate the elegant necessity and life-saving work of ecologists and scientists. After a conversation with ocean acoustician Dr. Judit Olson, I connected with an oceanographer who was looking for an artist to travel at sea for an ocean acoustics project. And I might add that in the interest of transparency, I should tell you that Dr. Olson is my son. He ended up being my collaborator for the active acoustics part of the project, and it was a gift for both of us. It was a really great experience. So as a result, I ended up on a muggy day in June 2018 on the RV Endeavor, and we were working with ocean scientists using sound to study marine ecology. And I was not only the artist in residence aboard, but I was part of the science crew, and I was learning and absorbing inspiration to create artwork that helps explain this young science. After 2.5 weeks at sea, the team pulled into our last study site off the coast of Virginia. The weather was warm and overcast, and the sea state was calm. It was very flat. Dr. Mixus Olds, the principal investigator for our project, had just given the word to pop the lander. That meant that the data collection equipment that was sitting on the ocean floor would be released. So all of us were scanning the immediate vicinity, searching for the orange floats attached to the hydrophones and data collection equipment. This was a 20-minute journey to the surface. It was a waiting game that we had successfully accomplished 6 other times, sighting and retrieving the lander, downloading the data, and plunging the equipment back into the ocean floor to continue collecting data. But this time, just as Jen gave the word to release the lander, everything changed in an instant. The wind shifted, the sea state kicked up, a heavy rain drenched us, and a curtain of fog descended. All this made finding the equipment a huge challenge. So this is science at sea. It's unpredictable, it's challenging, it's kind of nerve-wracking, but it's also very exciting. So why are scientists using acoustics to study the marine environment? We are visual creatures, but at sea, light only penetrates a few hundred meters under the water. Visibility falls off dramatically in deeper water, so the kinds of visual observations that biologists use to study terrestrial ecosystems are not particularly illuminating. Studying what is happening under the ocean requires a different approach. Ocean acoustics uses sound to describe what's happening in an ocean soundscape. Land ecologists study landscape, geology, and weather. Ocean acousticians talk about soundscapes. And a soundscape is just like a landscape. It's a picture of what's happening in the ocean environment using sound instead of images to describe the ecosystem. Scientists collect sounds from biologic life, human sounds like shipping, and abiotic sound like waves, wind, and ice. The EJTECH project uses both passive and active acoustics, and this natural divide inspired me to create 2 large textile pieces. Active acoustics uses sound to visualize what life forms inhabit the water column. A ping of sound is transmitted down from the ship. Those sound waves collide into the life forms that inhabit the water column, and the returning echoes or sound waves help to define the life forms found in that particular layer of the ocean. On the active acoustics artwork, I've included the echo sound or ping in this panel, and the returning sound waves in the middle and on the ends. You can kind of see how when you're emitting the ping from the ship, the waves look very orderly as they're traveling through the water column, but when they bump into life forms, what happens is that the energy waves are bumping into these organisms and creating a unique sonic signature that gets sent back to the ship. So here is an example of what the data looks like. This is an echogram recorded by Dr. Warren's night crew. And you can see why I was so inspired by an image like this. The data right here that swoops up like this fascinated me. One example of how active acoustics illuminates ocean life is how it describes a particularly dramatic event. The deep scattering layer, several hundred meters below the surface, is a mix of tiny life forms, zooplankton, small fish, and squids. Zooplankton and small fish form the foundation of the ocean food chain, but this also means that they themselves are food for many predators. They travel a daily migration to the surface of the ocean at sunset, where they feed all night, and at dawn they scoot back down into the gloom a few hundred meters below to hide from predators. This is actually a very clever strategy for survival, because in the open ocean there's really no place to hide. Just want to back up this so I can show you the slide one more time. So this was taken roughly at sunset, and as the sun finally slipped over the horizon, the last of the zooplankton are on the surface feeding all night, and at dawn the reverse curve happens when the sun starts to rise. So very dynamic, very interesting. So this is one of the pieces that I created sort of as a additional work to the Ocean Acoustics project. It was on all the marine animals that live in that layer. So if you want to see that artwork, we'll drop something into chat and you can learn more about that part of the project. I also embroidered a few species of phytoplankton on the active acoustics artwork. Phytoplankton supply half our planet's oxygen. The other half is from land plants, and they also sequester tons of carbon dioxide. That's not hyperbole. Very little is known about their life cycles, but as the oceans warm and ocean acidification rises, these foundational organisms are increasingly imperiled. Their fate is intimately tied with the fate of all organisms in the ocean. So before we move on to the passive acoustics artwork, I wanted to share a bit of my studio process with you. One source of inspiration for the project was the wall-sized embroidery works of Swiss artist Lindsay Funk. Monumental embroideries like these are rare and labor-intensive. Her work is even larger than the famous Bayeux embroidery created in 1066. Before I left on the research cruise, I had the opportunity to visit the Art Institute of Chicago and see this artist's work in person. The textile staff were kind enough to roll out her monumental works so that I could study them. This slide gives you some idea of the size of these huge embroideries. Her work remains fresh and unique, and even today among embroiderers, Lindsay Funk is a Picasso-like figure minus the ego and the drama. Here are a few of her textile sketches. Funk creatively expanded her stitch vocabulary and invented new ways to use stitch and fiber to express her ideas. Her creative approach inspired me to really let loose from the confines of traditional embroidery. Here are a few of my sketches developed in preparation for this project. I limited my palette to monochromatic tones of teal in both the silk background and the cotton threads I used. Limiting the number of stitches I used in the piece also created a more unified surface. Most of the stitches that I used on these pieces were various kinds of couching, Bokhara, Romanian, and regular, but I also used padded satin stitch, intentionally sloppy French knots, and yes, you heard that correctly. You can see down here, there's a few intentionally sloppy French knots, and I also used a wrapped back stitch for some of the equations. Simplifying some of the elements in the artwork allows me to focus on the science content of the work. I knew early on that I wanted to use silk dupioni. This fabric has a pronounced grain line, and I exploited this characteristic so that the surface of the art would shimmer like the surface of the ocean. Historically, heavily embroidered and beaded clothing would have been created as a sign of social status. By using these labor-intensive processes and materials, I'm creating a visual link that helps to elevate the subject matter and the science content that I'm illuminating. My aim is to pack in as much science information to the work as I can, but to develop the art in such a way that it stands on its own. Even if someone is not interested in the science, they can still connect with the art. Some viewers might be curious about learning more science, but as a former science avoider myself, I want to meet each viewer respectfully where they are. The second part of this project captures the power of passive acoustics to advance our understanding of ocean soundscapes. Because of limited visibility, marine mammals and fish are highly adapted at producing and perceiving sound in the ocean. Animals rely on sound for many purposes, such as navigation, maintaining social interactions, finding food, and attracting a mate. Passive acoustics uses underwater microphones called hydrophones to collect data. The equipment is collecting information in all directions and listening into the marine environment. So there's sounds of mammals, there's sounds of shipping and human activity, and also seismic activity and wind and ice and waves. I've interpreted the hydrophone data here using embroidery and beading. The ocean is a noisy environment, and I've included the ambient sound as an all-over stitching pattern. In the center of the artwork is a stand-in for the equipment that houses the hydrophones. If you look here, this is data collected from humpback whale sound. Here is a seismic event that's a little bit closer to the center. This is what the data looks like for shipping sounds. This data right here is kind of a mystery. This is still a very young science, so there's lots of room for discovery. Jen thought it was perhaps a school of fish, but again, that's for future researchers to parse. Around the edges of the piece, I wanted to represent a dramatic feature in the ocean soundscape called the SOFAR channel. SOFAR stands for Sound Fixing and Ranging Transmission. So sound bends up and down between warmer areas and areas of greater pressure. The SOFAR channel is a sonic sweet spot where the temperature and the pressure perfectly combine to create an ideal way for low frequency sound to travel. Marine mammals like humpback whales exploit the SOFAR channel to communicate across oceans. Their sound has been recorded traveling from Florida to Nova Scotia. So I would like to play you a small clip of the humpback whale sound This is at the Virginia study site that I mentioned at the beginning of my talk. This is a very sonically rich site. So you're going to hear not only the humpback whales, but you're going to hear pops and clicks from dolphins and shipping sounds, all sorts of things. There's lots and lots of other acoustic sound recording that you can find on the EJTECH audio gallery, and we'll drop a link into chat so you can do some more listening if you want to hear other sounds that were collected on this research trip. So as an artist, I'm always interested in what science looks like. I've worked with scientists in a number of terrestrial labs, but science at sea poses some unique challenges. While preparing for my trip, I told my family and friends that I was going on a science cruise. Some people, hearing the word science cruise, thought that at perhaps 5 p.m. in the afternoon, we might all be looking something like this. Well, not only was there no room for deck chairs, but we all worked 12-hour shifts around the clock, squeezing in as much data collection as we possibly could. It cost more than $50,000 a day to keep a scientific vessel afloat. Every moment of the research trip centers around science. You can see our quarters are functional, but they're not very luxurious, but luckily they were below the waterline, so it was quiet. The ship's complement worked 24/7, so it was really important to be respectful of the sleeping needs of the off-duty crew. In the first few days of our trip, we were trained at various emergency procedures, and it was both unnerving and reassuring to learn about all this safety information at sea. These survival suits were affectionately called our Gumby suits. So science at sea poses some unique challenges. Heavy equipment is deployed and retrieved by cranes on a constantly rolling, heaving surface. Every member of our ship's complement needed to stay alert. And every time we stepped on the deck to accomplish a task, we needed to remember our safety training. We never forgot that the ocean is a hostile environment for humans. One of the things that impressed me the most was how well the ship's crew, the science crew, the equipment, and even the ship itself functioned like a highly choreographed marine ballet in the service of science. Working at sea requires teamwork, patience, and generosity among crewmates. Amidst our 12-hour shifts were moments of grace, like the time a pod of pilot whales followed us throughout the day, the stunning sunsets and sunrises that we saw, the joyful welcome we received by a pod of 100 dolphins surrounding us as we pulled into the Virginia study site. We worked hard, but we were surrounded by a majestic beauty every day. Going to sea with the RV Endeavor crew not only inspired me to make art about ocean science, but it also permanently altered my view of our planet. Much like astronauts viewing the Earth from space for the first time, experiencing the vastness of the ocean and my own tiny presence in it made me appreciate just how dependent we are upon our fragile planet. Our oceans are mighty, yet fragile, and deserve our care and attention, and I've created textile art that celebrates ocean research. So some of you might be wondering what's next. Water has been a regular and passionate subject of mine throughout my career as a science artist, and I'm proud to say that I am currently serving as the Wetland Initiative's first artist in residence. Wetlands used to dominate our landscapes here in the US and the Midwest. They are powerful ecosystems that sequester carbon, capture and recycle excess nutrients, and attract an incredible plant and animal diversity. TWI develops innovative ways to use engineering skills yoked to an intimate knowledge of wetland ecology to create cutting-edge restoration projects. We'll drop a link into chat in case you want to learn more about this project. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our moderators, and I just want to say thank you very much again for inviting me to share my project today.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was really an excellent presentation. So we have a few minutes now to go through some questions and also have a discussion about the presentations today. I know I also have a couple of my own questions. We've got, for folks who are interested in asking questions, you can put those in the Q&A. I know Esteban has, I think, gone through and answered a couple of those directly already. First, I actually have a couple of sort of maybe more general questions for each of you. For EJTECH, I was wondering, first of all, how the two of you came to your shared practice. And I ask this as an artist who also has a long-term collaboration across sound and textiles. So I'm just always curious about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it started with a project called Chromosonic. Judit introduced me to augmented textiles or to soft circuitry, and I was dumbfounded by how amazing this medium can be. In my case, this is how it started. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we know each other from the same university, the Mohall University, where I studied textile art and design, and Esteban studied media design and animation, and that's how we came together since like it happened almost 8 years ago.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I think also there were a number of questions about your installations. I was curious if you could talk maybe just a little bit more about how you approach sort of, the different spatial ideas and how you use your materials in that way, and that might cover, I think, a number of people's questions on that front.
Something that I wanted to make clear is that the sound that you heard from the coils, it's actually coming from the textile. So these coils that you see on the textile are electromagnetic coils, or they're making the textile vibrate back and forth. It's also textile, so these are textile coils applied through heat to the textile, and then you input a voltage into them, and this is what makes them vibrate back and forth. It's the Faraday's law of induction, or this is how normal speakers actually work, but they work with like hard mechanics. In our case, we made everything soft, and it is a textile that creates or emits the sound. Each of the coils you could see in the pictures is an individual channel. I think this is something that maybe was not entirely clear. What was the question?
Oh, I was asking, I guess, generally, like more broadly in your shared practice, how you approach, because you do have a lot of sort of spatial work that you make. You also use a lot of different materials, which I really appreciate. The speaker project that you were just talking about was really lovely. I love the way that it also visualized so clearly sort of what was happening with the sound. But how do you make decisions about your installations, and how do you approach your material choices?
Sometimes it's very size specific, so or it's maybe it's around a topic that we are very much interested in. For example, in the case of Synopsis, we're very much interested in the language and the performativity of the textile material itself. In other cases, like for example, when in textile speakers, it's very much corporeal experience involving the whole body. So that's why it's quite misleading when you are hearing a textile speaker through a speaker, through your laptop, because you have to be very much present. So we are, in general, we are very much interested in textiles on a, let's say, metaphysical level, or textiles as a metaphors for life, for describing, let's say, for example, the whole universe, or how we are using the expressions connected to the medium of textiles in our everyday life as well. So for example, the fabric of the universe, or different relationships between the people, or it can be a next interface in between the human body and the environment as well. Those are
like
general topics.
Human-computer interaction through textiles. And we're also it sounds a bit vague, but we many times allow for the materials for themselves to speak in one way or another. So like materials do have desires. And when we have a certain subject that we're working with, we start with a palette, or we start with a tool set of different ideas. And eventually some materials work better than others, and they seem evident to use in each installation.
We like to approach this as a poetic science. So this poetical, lyrical side is very important to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are also, I think there are a couple of questions about actually like the specifics of interacting with the textiles. Have you had any projects where the viewers are actually touching things, or has that been a part of it? And how are you approaching? I know sometimes you're using these I should know this, but the conductive threads, also conductive fabrics. Are there any other tactics that you're using as far as tactility and the audience is concerned? So that's many questions.
I think we definitely want to. When we augment the textile, we embed the conductiveness into it. We don't ever create some sort of a Frankenstein textile in a way that sometimes, if it has like some harder materials, those don't belong to the textile. And this is why we like to keep our textiles entirely soft, our interfaces entirely, our circuitry, everything is just textile based. So yeah, like we do have a lot of work that is interactive with the audience, so the audience can touch, can feel, can really like grab a hold of it. For instance, like the one that we showed at Hirschhorn last year, the audience could interact with it fully, and each person can kind of like use it as an instrument. It is very it's explorative, so you have to like find where the sounds are. You have to see how you interact with it, and if you're playing it by yourself or you're playing it with somebody else, it is the way of kind of like diving back into sound through touch, through tactility, like the materiality of sound. And I think this is something that's in a time and age where, you know, it's very you can play a piano the wrong way. It's great that you can have an interface where you can interact with sound in a very, let's say, like intuitive where you can't really go wrong. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. So Lindsay, I've got a couple of questions for you also. And then my question actually was, I was curious if you could just talk about how you got into working between textiles and science.
Yeah, I was, like many artists, was a science and math avoider my whole academic career. And a bunch of years ago, I was interested in painting sort of idealized waterscapes. And my husband and I bought a canoe at the time. So we were canoeing down the Chicago Canal, and we ran into a SEPA station. And it's basically an engineered waterfall designed to add oxygen as part of the last tail end of the wastewater treatment project. But I didn't know that at the time. But finding out who built that expensive engineering structure in the middle of nowhere led me to the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. And that is like the world's largest wastewater treatment plant. And somehow or another, I had it in my head that it would be more important to create art about the real story of water rather than these idealized landscapes. So that was the start of the whole thing.
Oh, that's I love that description of it, and also that switch from sort of the ideal to the real seems really relevant, particularly as we get further and further into our climate situation. There's a question from Martha Heller who's asking what you're visualizing in your work at the Wetlands Residency.
Well, for the Wetlands Initiative, I stumbled across a funerary object at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that was buried with King Tut. And it's a fresh floral collar. And that was the inspiration for the other collars that I created about that. So my process generally starts with, first of all, learning accurate science. So I'm out in the field. I help to plant plugs. I help install water gauges. I fell in the mud. I had my muddy baptism. And I end up spending a lot of time talking to people who do the engineering and the science for the Wetlands Initiative. Then I go home and I think about cultural influences, color combinations, and what I'm responding to for color is the colors that I see in the field work. It's not as poppy as you would think. It's kind of on the quiet side. The colors are not, sometimes every once in a while the colors will pop a little bit, but mostly it was kind of a quieter set of colors. And then what I'm doing is I'm moving between the science and I'm moving between the art. So if I kind of get stuck on the science part, I go work on the art part. When I get stuck on the art part, I go working on the science part. But it's this back and forth between the science and the art, and also a sort of necessary component of creating science art for me is this feeling of discomfort and not knowing anything. So it's great that I don't know anything, because it's the effort to learn inspires me to make wider, deeper connections in the artwork.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I think we're actually at the end of our time for today. So thank you so much to all of our presenters for these really wonderful presentations and excellent work. We also want to thank our sponsors. The recording will be available on YouTube in next week's on SDA's website. Next Wednesday's Textile Talk is Terry Walker, The Power of Political Messaging and Activist Quilts, hosted by Quilt Alliance. Thank you so much, and everybody have a wonderful day.